I'm just going to go through the top 10 Rider-Waite-Smith tarot decks that I have in my collection. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go through the top 10 Rider-Waite-Smith tarot decks that I have in my collection. I do have more than this, but these are the ones that I have found I use the most, that I like the most. Well, let's start with a couple of the ones that show up on my channel a lot. The first one is the Radiant Rider-Waite, and this one, I use this one a lot because I prefer, as far as the coloring goes, this is one of my favorite Rider-Waite-Smith decks, and let me just show you. There's the back, and if you see, the yellows are very vibrant. Some of the yellows in the Rider-Waite-Smith decks can be a little glaring, garish. I don't know the proper term that you would use for that, but they're not quite as pretty, and the blue and the reds are just not quite as vibrant, and this deck is definitely what it's named, Radiant. So I really like that about this deck. And this is a typical, the size of a standard tarot deck. And I will go ahead and put links for all of these in the comments below. So if you're interested in seeing more about any of these decks, you can go ahead and scroll down into the description. The next one is one that I use a lot, is out of the Complete Tarot Kit, which is a kit that has the Rider-Waite-Smith and the Thoth tarot deck in them, and it has a tarot journal and a book that compares both decks to each other and talks about the history of tarot. It's a really great deck. I got this one kind of by accident. This is the Rider-Waite Tarot. This is a smaller deck size, but I bought a group of tarot, or a collection of tarot decks from someone, and that was one that I wasn't really interested in. It came with several that I was, so I just kind of got that one as a package deal, and it ended up being one of my favorite decks. I love the size of it. It fits great in my hands. The colors and the images are, I mean, I think the best thing I like about it is the size and the fact that it's a Rider-Waite-Smith deck. But the kit that this came in, the book was really fascinating. It showed card by card. It's comparing the Thoth against the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. And it was a fascinating read. It really did a great job comparing the two to each other. And you'll notice I actually have altered these decks. I have clothes on the people that are nude. So that is not how the deck comes. That was a nice little surprise, the package deal that came in. And that's probably one of my most used decks, is that smaller size there. I do also have in the Radiant Rider-Waite, that deck, I have the tin size, and I use that one quite a bit, as well as the bigger tarot deck size. The next one I have is the Smith-Waite Tarot deck, and this is the borderless edition. This too is also the size of a standard tarot deck. Here's the back of the deck. And these colors are a lot darker. They look almost tea stained, is what it's called sometimes. I love the fact that there's no borders, especially with small hands. I feel like the borders are sometimes a waste of space, and I wish they would just be small. And it's also easier to see the images here, especially if it's a day that I have a headache and I have readings to do. This is like so easy on the eyes, very soothing to the eyes. So there's definitely a place for this deck as well in my collection. And the card stock so far of all three of these decks is just what you would find in your typical US Games card stock, is what it feels like. Okay, the next one I have is the Pocket Tarot of the Universal Weight. And this is a small, it's got a nice hardcover box here. And this is a recent addition to my collection. Here's what the back of this deck looks like. And it does have borders. This is a really small size as well. Very close to, it's probably a little bit more narrow than a poker deck would be. But these colors are not quite as glaring as your typical Rider-Waite-Smith would be. The yellows are usually a little more glaring. So this is not quite as calm. Not quite as glaring as those. It's a more calm version of those colors. But you can see these here. It's very easy for me to shuffle with my smaller hands. The next one is one that I've shared before. This is the Mandel Limited tarot deck. I love the energy of the backs of this deck. Now, I did actually trim this deck down. It had a border around the edge that was this color here, this seafoam green, but the cardstock for this is much thicker than a standard tarot deck. Let me just pull this out here and show you. Look at the difference. This is my Radiant Rider-Waite, and you can see the deck is just, this one is significantly thicker. Now this deck, I love how colorful this is. It's fabulous. The cards are high gloss in this. They don't stick together like some high gloss cards do. They are very reflective, which depending on what you're using the deck for, that can be a bit of a challenge sometimes, but it does make these easier to shuffle, and I trimmed them down so that I could hold them more. This deck here, it does have some of those more glaring yellows that I was talking about, but I love the energy of the back of these cards so much that I don't mind this. So let me just, this is some of the glarish yellows that I was telling you a little bit about. I don't mind it so much, but you almost have to be in the right mood sometimes to use this deck. But I love it. Okay. Do you have a Rider-Waite-Smith deck that you love that I didn't include, or is your favorite on my list? Please let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Or if you're a beginner and you have any additional questions that you'd like to know about tarot or about Rider-Waite-Smith or any of the decks here that I've included, I'd love to hear from you too. The next one I have is the Smith-Waite Tarot deck. This is the Centennial Edition. This is similar to the images in the Smith-Waite Borderless Edition. And I'll show you the backs of these are similar to each other. The small Centennial version is not borderless, and you can see this one looks tea-stained as well. I love the decks in a tin because this is one that stays in my car all the time, and it's still brand new. I've used it quite a bit, but it's very protected inside the tin and it doesn't get beat up at all. But I like just how soft and easy these images are on the eyes. Now this next one is one that I have trouble shuffling just because the cardstock is so thick, but I love how these are colored in. It looks almost like they've used a Sharpie to color the edge. I do wish the images were a little sharper, but I love the color and the shape, the Radiant Wise Spirit Tarot. And it comes in a really nice hard box too. Now the back of this deck is one of my favorite backs. It's so vibrant. And there is a shiny finish on it. And these don't stick together at all. That is sometimes a concern, like I've said, with a shinier deck. But it does reflect a little bit when you're trying to share it with others. But you can see how just there's definitely more shading, more depth to this deck than the other ones. The other ones look more flat that we've seen, but you can see the light hitting on this side, and then on this side here there's more shadow. You can tell your light source is coming from here. Just gives it a more three-dimensional feel. So this one is kind of a fun version. This is the A.E. Waite, and it does have that kind of psychedelic look to it. The A.E. Waite Tarot. And I do have, I think it's the Chinese version that I have. But this deck is very fun. There's what the back of the deck looks like. And each of the cards has that feel to it, that psychedelic feel to it. And these are just your standard Rider-Waite-Smith images. But you can see that rainbow reflection on there. It's very fun. And it's harder to see it looking here on camera, but when you're in person, it is a little bit easier to see the images. They're not quite as difficult to see. I've got a lot of light shining on this right now. And when you're in a normal room with your ambient lighting, it's a lot easier to see. It looks more silver when you're looking at it in front of you. But this one's fun. again, this one, the cardstock is extremely thick. Let me grab that first deck again. Gosh, it looks almost twice as thick. It's not, but at first thought. This is the Radiant Rider-Waite, the very first deck that we looked at. And look at the difference in the cardstock here. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm kind of fumbling it here. Look at how much thicker this deck is. And then finally, the last deck that I have here is the Golden Universal Tarot. And this one is so pretty. This comes in your standard tuck box as well. And on the back of the deck, it's really pretty, kind of gold curlicues. And I've colored the edges, I've edged it in black. And then it's harder to see on camera, but there is gold gilding. There's a bunch of little gold gilding dots that's in the background. And it makes the images here that don't have any gilding on them kind of stand out as to be more 3D. On this one here, you see you've got the borders that are the gold gilding, and then there's a few images like his pentacle and his crown and some of the other details in here, and then the whole sky. In every card, the sky has these little dots of color that really add so much energy, and the sun is so vibrant. I don't know how well this is coming across, but I love using this deck. If you need the slightest bit extra energy in a reading and you love the standard Rider-Waite-Smith images, this is the deck that you go to. And it just brings with it so much energy to your readings. It's very helpful when you want to elevate the energy in a reading, or if you're not feeling like you're very energetic yourself when you're doing the reading. But those are my top 10 recommended Rider-Waite-Smith tarot decks for those of you who love the Rider-Waite-Smith system like I do. I know when I first started really getting into Rider-Waite-Smith, I had a hard time figuring out which deck I would like, which would work for me. And my hope is that by going through these and sharing them with you, you'll be able to find a deck that'll work for you. Thanks for stopping by. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you on the next time around.